So I'm John. I'm with a company called LandWatch, and LandWatch is a company that my brothers and I put together really as an excuse to work in agriculture. We're based on the Sunshine Coast, born and bred there, but developed a love for the outback and the bush based on sort of spending every September school holidays at a cattle station near Blackall. So we sort of surf, swim and sail all year, and then we got to spend 2 weeks of the year pretending to be station hands out on a station, and fell in love with it. But we ended up getting a bit too tied to the coast with family and kids that we couldn't really move out and do anything. So we thought we got to build a company that lets us get out and about. And so that's what we did with LandWatch. So what we do is we put camera systems on properties all across Australia and New Zealand, and we fully focus on agricultural properties only because they're better people to deal with. So we did a little bit of construction, a little bit in mining to start with, and we thought these guys are annoying. Let's just work with good people. So we ended up with agriculture because that's just where the better people are. And we've covered nearly the whole country now. We've got literally cameras in every single state and territory, as well as New Zealand. We've got cameras up in the Kimberley where the boys have to watch out for crocs when they're installing them. We just put some cameras in WA on 1 million acres where we had to fence off the camera system because the camels there are so crazy they're going to knock them down. We put some cameras down in the snowy mountains where the fog and the snow really taught the greenies that maybe solar panels aren't the answer to a renewable future. But what we love to do is put a camera where it's really hard to envision having a camera there. Because our philosophy is that we can literally put cameras anywhere and you can watch that camera from anywhere in the world. So for an operation like you guys are running, the idea is that you can protect what you've got and keep an eye on it from anywhere in the world. Or it might be, as Matt said, that you monitor something, maybe the staff, maybe the stock or the waters, and you can watch that live from anywhere in the world. So if you could skip another two. Oh, sorry, one. So what we want to chat about today is quickly about LandWatch. We've gone over that. I want to talk about rural crime and really what rural crime looks like in these days all across the country and in different areas, knowing that you guys make up a big portion of the top end of the country, particularly what we've really seen and heard, sort of having our ears to the ground, what's going on out there. And then we'll jump into a bit about how we actually recommend you protect your properties. So there's a few little intricacies that we've figured out when it comes to agricultural properties that you can't protect them the same way you would a place in town. Obviously it's different. Some places that we've put cameras on are 2.5 times the size of the Sunshine Coast where we're from, just in one property. So you got to look at it a bit differently. And we feel that there's a couple of tips and tricks that I want to leave you with, so that when you go home and start thinking about if there's something you need, you can have a few more ideas on how to do it. So yeah, next one. Yeah, jump that one. That's just a picture of me. All right, so rural crime, we all know about it, and I've already spoken to a few of you about what that might look like. And really, it's the classic theft of something that's that you own. Usually, it's going to be the fuel. Fuel is the hottest commodity there is. I mean, when you're paying $2.50 at the Bowser, you can understand pretty much why someone who's might be a little bit tight at the moment is going to knock it off. I don't know what it is, and someone has some explaining to do, but somebody has gone out and told every pig hunter and roo shooter that they're allowed to help themselves to the fuel. So 9 times out of 10, that's who it is. But sometimes it's just someone driving past, or unfortunately, a lot of the time, it's your employees as well. So giving them free fuel can help that, but then you end up giving them free fuel. So you deal with that how you want. Machinery and vehicle theft, a lot of the time, it's going to be the Land Cruiser. Time and time again, I see Land Cruiser and Dodge Ram parked next side by side to each other. Both got the keys in the car, and they're taking the Land Cruiser every time. Maybe because it's going to survive the trip out of the property, I'm not sure. But it's just it's going to be easier to flog is the main thing. So what they're looking for is stuff that's easy to get rid of. And a recent chat I had with the stock squad and the coppers up north was that the main issue isn't that there's these thieves around. That's one thing. The main issue is that there's too many people that are willing to buy stolen goods. So stolen Land Cruisers make their way out to a property in WA or the Territory where it's never even going to see a public road, and they'll pay decent money for it. So that's really where the problem exists. Same with fuel. Cops in Tasmania caught a guy because genius of a fella decided to sell the fuel he just stole down the road on the side of the road at 50 cents a litre. And chances are he got it from somewhere sus, and sure enough, they put him away. But obviously, out of all these things that can happen to your property, the biggest one is livestock theft. It's not the biggest usually in terms of monetary value or financial burden. It's just the biggest as far as how much it hurts, especially with guys like yourselves that have put so much time and effort into getting that breeding done, getting the genetics. Sometimes it's gone for generations. The hardest thing is when you come home and see that bull's been taken, or that you've lost 20 heifers out of the yards or something like that. And these are stories that we do here. Sorry, Marsha. So the problem with cattle stations, as I said, we cover every bit of agriculture. Cattle stations is our bread and butter, really. We do most of it. We've also done a lot of sheep, a lot of cropping, a couple of dairies, handful of feedlots, and just recently one oyster farm. So it still counts. That was really interesting because we had to develop a camera that could literally just stay in the water. So put a bit of stainless steel gear into that one. But the thing with cattle stations is that it's a bit of a two-edged sword. As you guys probably know, you're sometimes very remote and away from town, which is actually really good when it comes to crime. It's really hard for someone to get there. Unfortunately, it's also really hard for you to get there or the cops to get there. And if that's your second property, it's really hard to get anyone there. Another thing about it is that there might not be anybody in that area. It might be really isolated. And that's great because it means there's nobody there. You're not having someone drive past. This doesn't apply if you've got a property that fronts the highway. I was chatting to some fellas out the back of Winton, ages from anywhere, but the highway kept going in front of their property. So even though they were a long way from what you'd describe as a low socioeconomic town, which is sometimes the issue when you're close to a town, they still had a lot of issues because they had a lot of people driving past, a lot of truckies and grey nomads, and not pointing the finger or anything, but some of those people are the ones that end up being caught with the more opportunistic situations because they can see your house from the road. And so that in that regard, it doesn't matter where you are. If you're close to the highway, then you're very, very vulnerable. The other thing that we always say is the thing with cattle stations is that they know exactly what's in there. It's a classic thing I get all the time that people don't want to put cameras up because they're worried that it's going to be what causes them to get to be the victim. If I put a camera at my front gate, then people will know I've got something worth stealing. And I hate to break it to you, but everybody knows you've got something worth stealing. You and your neighbour and your neighbour's neighbour have all the same gear. I mean, I'd hazard a guess that everyone in this room has a Land Cruiser at home, a side-by-side buggy, multiple motorbikes. I don't even want to start talking about the horses and the gear in the tack room because that starts to get a bit scary when you think about something happening to that. But the point is that when someone's driving up and down the road, they know that every single gate has something worth stealing behind it. The point is, and what we'll try and cover today, is you want to make your gate look like the least favourable to go in. You want to make it look like the hardest target. I guess the police call it target hardening, and it's literally just a term that means make your stuff harder to steal than the guys next door. You know that old story about like you're with your friend in the bush and you say, like he says, you can't outrun a dingo if it starts to chase you, and you say, I don't need to outrun the dingo, I just need to outrun you. It's the same thing in rural crime. You don't really need to be perfectly protected. You just need to appear to be harder to target than the guy next door. If the guy next door gets hit, pass him on my card and we'll protect him as well. But what we've seen is places like that Taroom-Wandoan area or up through Lotus Creek where we've started to protect a lot of people in the one area, and it becomes a bit of a community watch that, hang on, now everyone in that area is fairly protected, and we see the entire crime rate of the area start to drop. So that's what we're really going for. It ends up being a rural neighbourhood watch, I guess, that 2 doors down might get hit, but it's actually your camera that picks up something, and you start to look out for each other, just like it used to be when we used to be able to leave our doors unlocked. So there is a few things with cattle stations that actually do make it even better and more protected. And the big one is that it's fenced. And you think, oh, that's not a big deal, they can cut the fence. Yeah, but we do a lot of work with cropping, and those guys are just sitting ducks. You can come in from anywhere and just and grab whatever. So the fact that you're fenced is definitely an asset and does make it a little bit easier in that we can really aim on what we're going to protect. So we can put a camera at the main grid or at the main entrances. Yes, there is a little bit of issues with someone cutting a fence, and we'll touch on that later, but really what we're trying to do, as I said, is make your place look like it's more protected, so covering that main entrance is key. What I love about a remote property is that there's that double-edged sword again, that someone could drive up your driveway and there's a chance that they're going to get the timing right, and they might find that the muster's happening and the morning school run's happening all at the same time and there's nobody at the whole complex. They can just help themselves. Or they might drive in and come across the grid and find 10 ringers having smoko and really wish they hadn't driven in that driveway. So you never know what you're going to find. Unfortunately, these days with Google Earth and drones, that's starting to become less of an asset to you. There is ways that people can find out what's going on across the grid without coming in. So my theory is if you see a drone in the sky, it's time for it to die. So I've had varying discussions with police that say you're not allowed to shoot them, but I mean, no one's going to dob you in if you shoot their drone out of the sky. Next one. So what we've actually seen, so these photos down the bottom are from our cameras, and the one thing I will stress is deterrence is key for us. We're all about deterring, and when it comes to your sort of plan to protect your place, you want to aim for that deterrence, which is why it's actually really strange for us and really rare for us to actually get any footage of something happening. But these are some that we did get. The one on the right here is someone stealing the fuel, and as I said before, that's actually an employee. So they were asking where the fuel was going. Everyone's like, oh, I don't know, and sure thing, old mate decided to help himself to the unleaded. And the one on the left-hand side there is a place in New Zealand that's actually a sheep. You can't really see it in the photo there, but an image before then you could see the guy dragging it, and he's rocked up. This is on the end of a laneway. He's rocked up in looks like his wife's soccer mum van, jumped the fence, had a look around, and then killed a sheep somehow in the paddock and dragged it back across to the fence. And I wish I could have played the footage, but we have footage of this guy, and I think he underestimated how heavy a sheep was, and he's dragged it across from outside the screen, across to the gate, and the poor fella's just keeled over and nearly died. I think he might have had a little vomit in under the fence line there, and he's just huffing and puffing for a good 5 minutes, and then he musters the strength to lift the sheep over the fence and then drag it into the side door of the car, and then couldn't get the car started and drove away. But long story short, he got caught a couple of days later. But what we found out was that everyone in that area actually knew of that little laneway and that back gate as the place to go to get a sheep. That was like the town's little free butcher shop. So much so that the butcher had noticed lamb purchases dropping. So the owner called us up and said, oh, this has happened. We caught this guy. I'm like, oh, cool. And he's like, I didn't realize that everyone knew about my little laneway. And then he's like, I just figured I was losing a few extra sheep. But he said, since then, word has spread through the town that you don't go to that guy's laneway anymore. And he said he hadn't realized how big of a difference it was. Speaking about cattle, the big one we get is when your yards are close to the road. Obviously, throughout history, it just seems to be a thing that yards are always built close to the road. Obviously, super convenient, but very, very dangerous to have the yards close to the road. We've seen it time and time again where stock are left in the yards to pick up the next day, and they get picked up that night. Obviously, there's got to be some sort of inside job. Had one down near Gundagai, and they 20 steers in the yard, meant to be picked up by a truck the next day. Everyone from the area was at a wedding that night. Everyone, probably except one guy, didn't get invited because those 20 steers went walkabout that night, which I mean is a massive hit to that family. It was fuel, small amounts and big amounts. So we've had 50,000 litres drained from a property. This is usually before they get cameras, and then they call us up. And we had a lot of small amounts. I'm talking like the tractor that's left out by the front grid or something like that. You go to jump in it the next day, and she's drained. Unfortunately, if you decide to lock that fuel cap, you'll end up with a drain tractor and a damaged fuel tank as well. So the impact, obviously, I don't have to really tell you guys, and I'm sure reading some of these, you can really think of the one that affects you guys the most. It's about not just losing that item, it's about what happens when that's not there. The downtime of not having that piece of machinery, or just sometimes the feeling of violation that happens. So what we're trying to do is to get something onto the property that will take the guesswork out of it, to take the worry out of it, so you can go to events, maybe like this, and not be worried, crap, I don't no idea what's happening at home, rather than getting home and having to find a cupboard door open or a gun safe open or something like that, just to realize that something's gone walkabout. So the goal is to try and remove the worry and the anxiety from that, and remove the downtime that occurs due to loss, and replace that with like a bit more of a knowing what's happening on your property. All right, so our keys are always going to be deterrence. Deterrence is key to everything, because I would much rather not lose a Land Cruiser than have some good footage of a Land Cruiser being stolen. You know what I mean? Which is why when it comes to property protection, having good footage of your property is not the main goal. Which sounds weird coming from a guy who literally sells cameras for a living. But the main goal is to have nothing happen on your property. And I want to be able to call someone up afterwards and say, how's the cameras going? They say, I don't even need them. No one ever comes on my property. And I say, perfect. That's goal number one. Goal number two is to have great footage, because you want to have that footage so you can give it to the police. And I really stress that because deterrence is key, it means that we're never going to hide a camera. I reckon every field day or event, someone comes up to me and says, I've got an idea. I'm going to hide the camera just off from the grid, and then when I see him, I'm going to find him in town. I'm like, you're not Jason Bourne or John Dutton. This is Australia. You're literally going to get in more trouble than the guy that nicked the fuel. Not to mention, you're not as fit as you used to be, and you're probably not that great a shot. The idea being that we want to have a sign at the front, a big camera at the front, and we want everyone to know there's no point coming on this property. And it's not just about the cameras. There's a theory in rural criminology called territorial reinforcement. And what that says is that if you've got two properties side by side, and one of them appears to be protected, appears to be looked after, and appears like the people actually care about it, versus the other one, which is a rundown gate or an overgrown grid with a half fallen down property sign, the criminals are more likely to go for that one for a number of reasons, because they're less likely to get caught, obviously, because there's no camera or protection, but also there's a little bit of guilt and conscience involved, which I didn't think these type of people had that, but if they can think that doing one property over is going to lead to less of an impact on someone, then they're going to target that one. So if your better half's been nagging you to paint the wings of the grid or improve the property sign out the front, there's probably more to it than just keeping up with how the neighbours look. It's actually a pretty good theory in terms of property protection. Making your property, and I'm talking about things like the biosecurity sign, the warning sign, report to office, call this number if you're coming on, things like that make it look like these people care about their property, protect their property. They're going to notice something missing straight away and they're going to chase you down, versus the guy that doesn't really appear to put much attention into it. So other than deterrence, which is, as I said, key, early alert. As I mentioned before, there's nothing worse than getting home and realising that someone's been on the property. For a lot of people, they're still relying on seeing car tracks on the road. Or I had one fella that his big technical method was to put a jerry can in the middle of the track, and if he got home and the jerry can was moved, then someone had been on his property. And I'm like, that's fantastic, except it's 2024, there's really good methods of doing this now. I was sitting down listening to one of the other speakers and my phone did a little vibrate, and I jumped on and looked and I could see that my wife was pulling through the gate at my place back in Sunshine Coast. And that's what it's about. And then it went off again and I looked and I saw someone else pulling in. I was like, this is weird. But then they did a U-turn and pulled out. I'm like, oh, okay, good. Nothing to worry about. Final one, recorded footage. Overall, it's, as I said, deterrence is key. You want to know when someone's on your place and you want to have the footage to prove it. And when we talk about recorded footage, we want good quality footage. I've had many, many discussions with the police officers that service Queensland and New South Wales, and their main thing is to have footage that can actually be used. At the end of the day, if you've invested money into protecting your property, and then you end up with footage that can't actually be used, well then you've actually pretty much wasted your money, because all they can do with it is say, yeah, I think I know that guy from town, but I can't prove it because this image is too blurry or this image just doesn't do the trick, which is why you have to use the right camera for the right job. Sort of like the reason why you don't drive a Hyundai on the property to do the water run, you drive a Land Cruiser because it's going to make it and actually do the job. For the same reason, if we have a camera that's monitoring a front entry, you want it to be a number plate recognition camera, because that way, day and night, rain or shine, someone comes in with a giant light bar on, like a lot of the piggers have these days, you're still going to get a number plate on the front of it despite the headlights. So right camera for the right job is really key. So LandWatch, as I said, we literally provide cameras in any situation. And the main idea of LandWatch is about putting a camera exactly where it needs to be. So my brother James started the company, and he found that in town you can have cameras really easily. If you've got an industrial shed in town, you've got a front and rear entrance, then you can put a camera there, connect it to the internet, you've got great reception, put the camera underneath the eave so it'll last for ages. Great, easy to do. But when you go and apply that to a 500,000 acre cattle station in the territory, or even 10,000 acres down the snowy mountains where they're getting some extreme conditions down there too, all of a sudden the situation changes and you have to rethink it. So that's why we have multiple power options. So when you're putting a camera somewhere, you want to make sure that you can put it right up next to the grid for that deterrent factor. If you have to put the camera back up on the shed and you're not getting the deterrent factor, and what you're actually getting is purely just recorded footage. If somebody has to drive up the kilometre driveway from your grid to your shed and then they see a camera, in their heart and in their soul, they've committed, their adrenaline's already racing. You're going to get footage of them there and of them taking something, but you're still going to lose something. So that's why the idea is to put the camera at the front grid, which is why we need solar power. We've got, you can use power as well, but when I say we can use mains power, you want to make sure that if you're putting the camera on mains power, and this applies to LandWatch cameras or any cameras that you're putting in there, if you're putting a camera on mains power, make sure that power is reliable and that it's not on a shed where the switchboard is at the front of the shed, because literally they could just come in and switch it off and then you're down. Ways around that is you have that camera solar powered, or you can have that camera with a backup battery in it. Connectivity is the big one, and obviously a big factor for most of us here, because when you're in town, you've got 4G connectivity, you've got internet. But when you're out on a station somewhere, you might be lucky enough to have 4G. Next one. Or if you don't have 4G, or what we normally do is this. So what we want to just touch on is the fact that connectivity now in 2024 is not an issue at all across Australia. There's no reason that connectivity should impact day-to-day operations in any way, shape or form for any person in agriculture across Australia. 3G turned off and all that, irrelevant. Because now with Starlink and with stuff like this LandWatch links, you can have connectivity across any part of a property. You can take your internet connection from your house to a set of yards 30 kilometers away and have the same speed internet there that you do at your house, saturated in 500 meter radius of the yards. You can have a Starlink on your vehicle. They just released a Starlink Mini yesterday, which is a much smaller one, a lot cheaper. On your vehicle, on your plane, at the yards, on a camera station, anywhere in the country. And then you can have faster internet than people get on NBN, that lovely thing that the government spent $50 billion on. So thanks to old Elon Musk, and now Amazon's coming out with their competitor, which is always going to be good for us. So you've got two options to go for. You can have connectivity wherever you need it. So the way that we do it is so that we don't end up with 7 Starlinks around your property or 13 NBN connections or heaps of SIM cards. We'll do these LandWatch links. And this literally involves a point-to-point connection across the property. So if you imagine you've got, say, a bore at where the house is. You've got the water source there. So you run a length of poly out to the shed, one out to the entry, and one out the back to the yards. So now you've got that water connected. But then you need to put something at the end of there in order to access it. It might be a trough. It might be a trough with a float on it. It might be a sprinkler. And say the irrigator would be the equivalent of, I guess, Wi-Fi. So we can send the internet along that path and then saturate that area at the end with the Wi-Fi. And this is what we do when we want to take, say you've got a cottage just a little bit down the road on your place. Mother-in-law might live there and you want them to have access to internet. Well, don't put another internet connection on there. Just send the one you've got down there and have them access it there. Same thing goes for the camera out the back. So we shoot it all the way out there and we can have a connection to it out there. So the way it works is completely wireless. Now the beauty about the LandWatch links is that it's a two-way street. What we're doing, we're taking the internet from the house and we're shooting it all the way out to the backyards or the shed or another house up to sort of 30 kilometers away. But it's taking the internet out there so you can use it for the camera and use it for the Wi-Fi. It's also taking all that footage from your camera back to the house. So from a security, a property protection point of view, that's vital. Because if you've got a camera in an isolated area out the back and the back entry where maybe there's a road frontage out there, obviously any fella with a cordless angle grinder in his ute or a shotgun can destroy that camera pretty easily. But if you've got a two-way street lined up with the link, then you can have that footage that's recorded out there instantaneously stored back in the house, which is just really, really vital from a security point of view. They're the devices that you're going to use, and some of you might have already used some of these devices on your place in order to move the internet around or to give better coverage. The one on the left in the big picture, that's a place down in the Riverina where we've been able to shoot the big dish about 17 kilometers away in order to get that connection. So we were able to get that line of sight connection because we were able to put it on a silo elevator like that one there. So there's varying different degrees of distance that we can go with that. The point being that distance isn't an issue at all. So we have a lot of people call us up from out west and they're like, oh no, you never cover my place, like it's just too big. I'm like, no, I'd rather do your place than somewhere in towards the coast because hills get in the way like anything. We need line of sight. But then having said that, sometimes the hills can be great because it can be the point that you put a repeater station on, maybe 1 or 2 on the property, and from there you can see everything you need. By far the worst place to do is that Riverina area where it's just so dead flat that there's nothing to get any sort of rise on. Luckily though, they got big silos and silo elevators to stand up on, and the boys have just started putting up our own 20 and 30 meter towers so that we can get that extra height in order to get line of sight. So once we've got the power and we've got the connectivity, it's about using the right camera for the job, as I said. So if you're protecting your place, you want to be using cameras that are designed for that purpose. So if you've got, say, a set of yards and you want to know who is loading up from the yards, or what truck's pulling up, or you just want to keep an eye on everything that's in the yards, or you want to just watch the fuel, something like that, and actually see where they are, then the fixed camera is perfect. It's just a little thing that sits there. But if you want to watch the entry, then you really need to go for an entry camera that's designed for, the next one, for that purpose. And normally I bring it with me, but the fixed camera from before is about sort of fit in the palm of my hand. Perfect. Put them up. I put them all over the sheds, all over the yards, all over the house. That's great. But when it comes to an entry, the ANPR camera is about this big. And that's for a reason, because ANPR means automatic number plate recognition. And I can't stress it enough that if you ever see someone selling a camera claiming that it's going to get number plates and it's not this big, it's not going to work. There's a reason why when you drive out of the shopping centres or you drive around town here and you see the big cameras, they're usually down about this low watching your number plate. When you drive out of the car park, there'll probably be one. That's because that's what's required to read that number plate. And I'm not just talking about getting an image like this one here of what the number plate says. When that number plate was picked up, that was then imported into an Excel spreadsheet, the digits written down and time and date stamp of when that car came in. So from a biosecurity point of view and a workplace health and safety, just general management point of view, that's really vital. And it's better than just having an image where you have to sort of get the magnifying glass out and try and figure out what that number plate is. So I can't stress it enough, for an entry, we always will recommend a number plate recognition camera. Now my favorite camera is a PTZ camera. Some of you might have seen them before. There's a fair few around town outside actually. It's called a pan tilt zoom camera. The image on the left there is the camera zoomed out. This is on a windmill out at Blackall. The next one is halfway zoomed in, and then the calf here is when the camera was all the way zoomed in. That calf is sitting about 180 meters away from the windmill. And this camera is what's used when you want to do a bit more general monitoring and management. So, but what I always stress is that this camera isn't designed necessarily for security. So when I tell people that a PTZ camera like this can pan around and see a lot of things, then they think, oh great, I'll put it up on the shed and then I'll cover the whole area. Or I'll put it on the entry and then I can see every gate that's coming in, but it's only going to see one area at a time. So when it comes to security, you're better off putting multiple cameras on in order to see it, because if you put a camera like this on here and it's watching the entry, but you're thinking, oh, I'll move it over to this entry if someone comes in there, well, they're coming in there when you're not ready for it. So you need to put a camera on watching each particular spot that you want to see at all times. All right, so I'll finish up with a bit of a case study. This is a property halfway between Tambo and Blackall, of where we put some cameras. Exact locations have been tweaked a bit just from a privacy point of view, but what we ended up doing was putting the gear at the homestead here in the middle. Oh, I think I've got a laser. The homestead here in the middle. And the reason for the cameras on this place is because they had the Tambo Blackall highway running through the middle there. And what they noticed one day when they came home was that there was someone camping on the front lawn. Now it seems weird, but I hear it all the time. You got your peak hunters and your kangaroo chasers that think they're allowed to steal fuel whenever they want. And then you've got these hippie backpackers from overseas that literally don't know what a property boundary is. I'm sure some of you have seen it, where you'll get home and there's someone camping there, or you'll see a fire on the side of the road somewhere where that's not even a camp spot. But what they did was they put a camera there so they could get an alert every time someone crossed that creek. Because once they cross coming off the highway and then crossing the creek, so they know, okay, someone's come in. This was done by shooting the signal to a repeater station, and from the repeater station down to the camera. So you've got the entry covered, so now you know that someone's come on your property. You've got the deterrent camera up the front there, so that when someone decides to pull off the highway, the first thing they see is this camera, and chances are they're not even going to come in at all. I love it that when I went out there not long ago, and when I drove past, I could see that camera from the highway. Which means as people were driving around thinking, all right, which fella's next? Like, everyone's got the same gear inside, who am I going to take? They see this driveway and they know, okay, no point doing that one. That's the hardest in the area. But then if they do come in, then the owner has the alert on his phone straight away that somebody has entered. Not only that, we've got cameras on the fuel and cameras on the sheds. Fuel, when you're putting a camera on the fuel, it has to be positioned in a spot that can actually see the person filling up the fuel. Don't just put a camera that just generally watches the fuel and you see, oh, this car pulls up, this car went away. And same thing goes with the shed. It's not sufficient to have a camera that sees someone pull up to the shed and then drive away. You need to see them pretty much red-handed. So you have a camera on the fuel that can see him grab the nozzle, a camera in the shed that can see him grab the chainsaw or the generator or the hand tools. And then out to the yards and back again. So the point being is that what we want to achieve is having eyes on the ground that can actually see the things that you wish you could see. So if you just go to that final one, the takeaways really are when you're driving home and you're thinking, oh, like when I get home, if I saw car tracks, maybe you will see car tracks when you cross the grid, what's the first thing my mind goes to that I'm worried about? Because if you're worried about, oh, I've got that vintage Holden in the garage or something like that, or maybe it's the brand new tractor that you probably shouldn't have spent that much money on, but you did anyway because Brahman prices are going so well. Whatever your mind goes to straight away, that's what I always say to protect first, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to achieve is peace of mind. Peace of mind that that nobody's snooping around your place or that you're going to get home and see those wheel tracks. So peace of mind's first, and really being the hardest target in your area is what it's all about. I chatted with some insurance people not long ago, trying to convince them to let people that have cameras on their property pay less premiums, but they weren't keen to drop their premiums. But what they did said is that if you're not making claims all the time, then that means your premiums aren't going to go up. And I said, yeah, well, that's all well and good, but like, I guess we want to do more than just not make claims. We want to actually be on the offensive, which is why we don't put cameras there as an insurance policy in itself. That's what insurance is for. We put cameras at the front gates with the alerts, sometimes with sirens and flashing lights, and cameras that you can actually speak through and yell at people, because we're being on the offensive. We're taking the proactive approach and protecting your property, not just as an insurance policy hoping something's not going to happen. And I'll just finish with deterrence is key. That's why we don't ever hide cameras. Put the camera at the front gate. If you came to us particularly and said, I've only got this much to spend, I will put the vast majority of that budget into the front gate, purely because it's a deterrent thing. And if someone's driving up and down that road and they see that camera, then they're going to go next door. Until you're in an area where literally everyone has a camera and you think, okay, well, now what I'm going to do to step up and be the hardest to hit in the area. But until then, put the camera at the front gate, and then we can think about doing the rest of it later. But yeah, thanks so much for having me, guys. It's been really good.